Hi everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to be talking about polyphonic modulation. So I've chosen to use Hive here to explain the concept. It has 4 different modes on its LFOs as to how they restart. So I guess I'll start by explaining what is the restart. So if we take a look at a waveform, let's just bring up a nice big picture of a waveform here. So you can see it has a start and an end, which are the same. And then in the middle, it either goes into negative phase or positive phase up here. And of course, if we get a more complex waveform, there's a lot more that goes on in between. And of course, LFOs are just waveforms. The saw-down waveform, which I've chosen here, of course, looks like this. So now I've got it acting on the filter here. So it's going to be opening up that filter and then closing it. So I'll just play a note. And it has a fairly sharp beginning, and then it sort of tapers down, and then it repeats the process. If it was a sine wave, it would be smooth. But the saw-down waveform is going to be most useful for us here explaining what's going on. So let's take a look at our MIDI. And right now we've got it set to sync. So what that means is the LFO, because this is pretty much the beginning of where we're starting, if it was in the DAW view here, like the familiar linear view, the LFO would sync to the beginning of this song, and it would just play throughout. So in this case, it's half a bar, so it would complete its full cycle from here to here. And then it would start again. Now, if we take a listen to how that sounds, I'll just play this through. You can hear it's completely consistent in how it actually modulates the filter. Now, you can hear something happening when the new notes come in, but what you're actually hearing is just the beginning of a new note. I think it might be tripping it up slightly, or it's just the sound of the sharp attack. But regardless, it's actually one single LFO acting on all voices. So one thing to keep in mind when you're trying to understand polyphony in synths is to remember that each time we enter in a new note, we're actually starting a whole entire new voice within that synthesizer. And that voice may or may not have its own LFO. Right now, there's effectively just one single LFO acting on the entire synth. But if we switch this to gate mode, we'll actually get an entirely different response. But before I do that, let's go to single. Now the difference between sync and single is, well, let me just show you. Basically, what it's going to do is the LFO is going to sync at the start of a new note, but only when all notes have been released. So, for example, let me shorten all of these. So the LFO is starting again right here, and you can see this is sort of inside the bar, whereas previously it was right at the beginning. So next we're going to hear the gate mode. Now what's happening in gate mode is every voice will have its own LFO completely independent of the other voices, and that LFO will begin when the voice begins. So if we take a look at our MIDI pattern, that means LFO 1 for the first voice is going to start here, and you can see I've offset these. So we're actually going to hear the different LFOs running in different syncopation. And this can get more interesting the more notes, of course, we add to this. Right now it's sounding a bit like an arpeggiator, but there's a difference to it because we can go ahead and change the waveform in a minute. We can also randomize it. So we'll come back to all that in a second. Right now, I just want to introduce another idea here, is that we can offset these to be a little bit out of sync. And if we go and change the shape here, and we can speed this up. And then we can also switch it to random. So of course what happens here is the sort of timing of where we end up starting the LFO waveform is going to be randomized. Let's go back to our saw down. Let's switch it up. Each time we do this, it's going to sound different. we can slow it down a little bit if we want. And then of course we add some delay, it sounds even more like trippy. And each time we play through this, we're going to get an entirely different pattern. Let's switch this to saw up. And we could assign this to panning as well. And we could even make this a random hold waveform too. So have a bit of fun with that and put on one of my favorite reverbs. We'll put it on one of these presets here. Let's do this. It's easy to overlook just how much incredible depth and variety you can get out of a single patch just by being aware of how you can use those LFOs to your advantage to create something interesting. And in this case, it's literally going to be unique every time you press play, or to an extent, because the position is randomized. Now, not every synth will have all of these parameters, but I think Hive is a good choice here to show what you can expect to find as you go from synth to synth. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this video, and I hope to see you again next time. Take care.